The overshift is on, and Bassitt deals. And Bonds hit one high. It's a deep. It is out of here. 7:56. Bonds stands alone. He is on top of the all-time home run list. What a special moment for Barry Bonds. And what a special moment for these fans here in San Francisco.
98% of the people who watch that moment will go back and say to their children, you know, see that guy who's indicted, see the perp walk he's doing outside the federal courthouse? I saw him break the record.
Shakespearean tragedy, I mean, King Lear. And, but as often happens in those tragedies, the people often bring those tragedies on themselves.
I mean, that's what, when I think of Barry Bonds, I don't think of his accomplishments as a ball player. I just think of what a burden it has been to cover him and to talk about him on the radio for so many years.
I mean, the fact of the matter is it's sports, and we all want to be entertained. And he was the most entertaining player in the game when he was at the dish. The guy could hit balls that nobody else could hit. Now, were they all legit? I don't think so, but it didn't stop me from watching.
I've run into guys that are difficult and didn't want to talk. Hey, that's fine. Just don't be rude about it. It's my only thing.
Well, I think I could speak for everybody that followed his career for 15 years. I mean, I can speak as just like another fan that was out in the bleachers watching him. I was sad to see it end.
The fact that he's been mentioned in the Mitchell Report, Game of Shadows, I think everybody sort of inherently knows that he did these things, you know, and that's a huge stain on his legacy in a lot of places. Like I say, for me, the talent is always going to override the baggage.
There was a little bit of a delicate balance in that I think we always had to keep in mind that these are huge moments for us, but our job also has to stay with the team itself, and Barry has to be a part of that context.
You know, I occasionally saw this other side of Barry, which made me realize how different things could have been if he was willing to show that. But, I mean, he's a very, very interesting person.
Everybody is certainly entitled to write whatever they wanted, but to keep attributing things to the fans themselves, or even criticize Giants fans for cheering Barry, missed the whole point.
I knew it was going to be an event. I always had conflicts about whether it was an achievement. It's two different things, you know. It was a record, it was an event, but it wasn't an achievement.
You know, we're fighting this skepticism from around the country. Should we really be excited about this, and are we supposed to be embarrassed to be excited about this? But I've always found that there be a lot of legitimacy to Bonds' records, and have appreciated the genius of his hitting, and I think it definitely goes down with the greats, and maybe not with Joe Montana and the 49ers, just because it did have that odd stigma to it. Whereas the Montana and the 49ers was kind of an unconditional love, you know, or the Warriors title in '75. But I think it's up there at the top.
We were sort of walking a tightrope. In this case, it was different from other things that you knew were going to happen inevitably. Being the Balco paper and considering our coverage, we wanted to cover it thoroughly as a news event, but we certainly weren't going to be probably as celebratory as we would have been had not all the steroid accusations come down.
Somebody's going to get elected president this year, and at the moment it happens, a whole bunch of people are going to be happy and a whole bunch of people are not going to be happy, but no matter what, it's an event, and it's a newsworthy event, and that's kind of how I approached it.
it's more an issue of tone and how is our, things as sort of nuanced as, how is our typography going to reflect this? Are we going to use exclamation points in the headlines? Is it going to take up the entire front page? Are we going to do a special section afterward, recognizing the achievement? So those were the kinds of things that we talked about.
I think what made it even better was the fact that he had this persona. He had these off-field activities. If it was just a straight record, it probably wouldn't have been as interesting. I know when the team was on the road, he was booed everywhere he went, but that's what made it interesting. So I think the fact that Barry had this going for him made the story even bigger and better than it really is.
There was a lot of talk about what are the stories? Where does the Balco case stand is part of the story? Where is his place in history? What is the Hall of Fame going to mean? What are, how does this compare to Hank Aaron? How does it compare to Babe Ruth? And through it all, at least when I was writing, I was trying to remember that my audience was as conflicted as half my audience didn't want to hear a thing about Balco, didn't want to hear a thing. They just wanted to say, "Yay, Barry, way to go!" And the other half thought it was the biggest, fraud that's ever been perpetuated on sports.
I remember asking people, because I kept reading, the writers kept saying, this joyless march toward the record continues, the record that nobody wants to see him get and all that. And I kept saying, how can you write that? What are all these people selling out these ballparks? What is it they're exactly hoping to see, Why do they buy all these tickets? So obviously they wanted to see it.
I felt as though I were surrounded in this market. 90% of the people in the press were caught up in this home run chase like the fans were. And you got a lot of people in the media, as you know, that are sports fans. They're not just reporters or journalists, but they're fans.
Certainly when we decided how we were going to cover it, how much space we were going to devote to it, we had to realize that we were writing primarily for our local audience. I mean, now with the internet, clearly we had people looking at what we were writing on sfgate.com, but still in terms of the print product, we certainly were catering to a local audience.
I'm paid to have him be contentious with me. I'm a very, very practical guy that way. Okay, if that's the way it's going to be, that's the way it's going to be. My job is to find out something interesting to write about this whole thing. And if he wants to be that way, fine. He never slugged anybody. He never. I know athletes who've had physical confrontations with writers. He never did that. He was just, he was really rude and not pleasant and didn't always answer all your questions. Well, okay, so we'll deal with that. And we'll still try to come up with something interesting to write.
I just thought he was such a drag on the team. And I was tired of going into the clubhouse, hanging out with 40 other people, staring at an empty half-acre of locker space, other players looking at you like, God, you got nothing better to do here. And then Bonds comes in, he's got his back to you for 20 minutes while he ties his tie. Then he has nothing to say.
Even if he blows off a reporter or a broadcaster and doesn't want to talk or acts like a jerk or whatever it was, the fans in the stands don't care, right? The listeners, they don't care. They're not thinking about that. So if you let those kind of things impact the job that you're doing, I don't think you're actually really doing the job.
If you're dealing with the team and the man from late February until 1st of October or late in October, you've kind of got to play the game. And they've taken their shots at him, but overall I think they've been exceedingly fair just because you have to. I mean, Bonds has been a big part of the Giants story.
I think our beat writer, Henry Schulman, has pretty much ignored the insults that Bonds has hurled at him and figuring, well, hey, it's nothing personal because Bonds has done it with everybody. But, might have had an influence on the columnists over the years in trying to deal with them and, difficult. It's just human nature. You're writing about somebody who's blown you off time and time again. I didn't see it. I think if it was clear that somebody was picking on Bonds only because of his personality, I would have stepped in and said something to one of my columnists. I didn't see that in my columnist.
When he does talk, it's usually news, but oftentimes we were writing stories without any perspective from him. And so it wasn't so much a complaint as, well, here's all I have today because Barry's not talking. That's kind of the way it went. Or, we had to go around him. I talked to the trainer or I talked to the manager or whatever it is. I talked to his teammates, but I don't have any comment from him. And it sort of wasn't a complaint situation so much as this is just how it is and we have to figure out a way around it.
You get moments of clarity from Barry from time to time where even he says, you know, I probably brought some of this on myself by not always being the friendliest person to be around. And that said, I never believed that there was a personal agenda against Bonds. I never believed that people were out to get him necessarily.
His basic nature was to attack the press, to distrust it, to dismiss it, to humiliate it every chance he could, just to get back for him and his dad and his whole life. That was one of his fundamental principles, was that the media is evil.
He, because of his weird upbringing, you know, a black kid in a largely white community, in a real rich community where he was the spoiled kid, or his dad was away a lot, and his dad happened to be an alcoholic, unfortunately, and you know, and all this stuff. He just doesn't know how to relate to the real world the right way, I guess, or the way most of us do. I don't know.
I mean, we can go all the way back to his dad and his days in Pittsburgh as to why he has an adversarial relationship with the press, but clearly he did. On more than one occasion, I heard him talk to a reporter and say, why should I stay here and talk to you when I'm not getting paid for doing this, and you're getting paid and you're going to write bad things about me? And so it became kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Did I watch him be a complete jerk to people? Yes. Was he a complete jerk to me? No. So, you know, it's one of those things where you see someone being a certain way, you make your judgments about how they are as a person. But personally, he and I would say, you know, we had conversations occasionally, and, you know, I occasionally saw this other side of Barry, which made me realize how different things could have been if he was willing to show that.
I think there's definitely a couple of sides to him, maybe more than that. I think that off-the-field persona that so many people like to glom onto is real. I don't think he's making it up. I think there's definitely a ballpark Barry and an off-the-field Barry, so I think I definitely understand him around the game, but as a complete person, I don't think that I do. And I wish I did.